The city of Troy stood defiant, its mighty walls casting long shadows over the battlefield, a silent witness to the endless struggle between Greeks and Trojans. But within the Greek camp, a heavy silence had fallen. Achilles, their mightiest warrior and the heart of their army, was dead, struck down by a fateful arrow to his vulnerable heel. The loss was more than personal. It was a blow to the very spirit of the Greeks. As his funeral pyre burned bright against the dusk, the flames seemed to consume not just a hero, but the hope of victory itself. Yet from the ashes of grief, a new conflict ignited. Who would inherit Achilles' divine armor, the greatest prize left behind? This was no ordinary prize. Forged by the god Hephaestus himself, the armor gleamed with otherworldly brilliance, a symbol of ultimate honor, leadership, and the favor of the gods. To possess it was to be marked as the greatest among the Greeks. Two heroes stepped forward to claim it: Ajax the Great, unmatched in strength and courage, and Ulysses, king of Ithaca, renowned for his cunning mind and silver tongue. Each believed himself worthy, but for very different reasons. Ajax argued his claim with deeds. He had braved the chaos of battle to carry Achilles' body from the field, his immense strength saving the fallen hero from dishonor. He had fought at the front lines, risking his life time and again for his comrades. To Ajax, the armor was a reward for brute courage, loyalty, and the willingness to face death for the sake of his brothers in arms. Ulysses, however, saw things differently. He claimed that the war would be won not by strength alone, but by strategy, intelligence, and the ability to outthink the enemy. He reminded the Greeks of his cleverness, how he had persuaded Achilles to join the war, how his plans had led to countless victories, and how his wit had saved lives when brute force could not. Ulysses argued that true leadership required wisdom as much as bravery. The stage was set for a contest: brawn versus brains, tradition versus innovation, the old ways of war against the new. The entire camp buzzed with anticipation, knowing that the outcome would shape the future of their struggle. The fate of the armor would decide not just a leader, but the very values that the Greek army would follow. Would they honor raw strength or celebrate cunning and intellect? As the contest began, the camp held its breath, every eye fixed on the two heroes, knowing that the decision would echo through legend for generations to come. The Greek leaders assembled beneath the open sky, the air thick with tension and anticipation. Each man knew the decision before them would shape the fate of heroes and echo through legend. They gathered to judge the claimants, weighing not just strength but wisdom, loyalty, and the will of the gods. Ajax spoke first, his voice booming across the council. His words were blunt and forceful. He was the strongest, the bravest, the most loyal. He reminded them that he had never faltered, never hesitated in battle, and surely the armor was his by right. He listed his battlefield feats, recalling moments when his courage had turned the tide and his sword had protected his comrades. He spoke of his shield, battered but unbroken, that had saved them all, and of his noble lineage descended from heroes of old. Then Ulysses took the floor, calm and persuasive, his eyes steady. He praised Ajax's strength and valor, acknowledging his deeds. But Ulysses argued that mindless force alone would not win Troy. He spoke of the need for cleverness, for strategy, for the wisdom to outthink their enemies. Ulysses reminded them of his cunning strategies, the plans that had saved lives and brought hope when all seemed lost. He spoke of his role in their greatest victories, of how his mind had been their secret weapon, turning defeat into triumph. Ulysses insisted that only intelligence and foresight could finally end the long, bitter war. Athena, goddess of wisdom, watched from afar. She favored Ulysses, her subtle influence weaving through the minds of the judges, tipping the balance in his favor. The leaders, torn between the power of Ajax and the intellect of Ulysses, cast their votes, guided by both argument and the unseen hand of the divine. By a narrow margin, the shining armor was awarded to Ulysses. The decision was met with murmurs, some of admiration, others of disbelief. Ajax was stunned, his strength dismissed, his honor wounded, his heart heavy with shame and anger. For Ulysses, it was a triumph of intellect, a victory for wit and wisdom over brute force. For Ajax, it was a humiliation that would fester into something darker, a wound that pride could not heal. In that moment, as the council dispersed and the sky darkened, the seeds of tragedy were sown, destined to grow in the shadow of their rivalry. Ajax's world collapsed, his pride shattered, his anger overwhelming. Betrayed by his comrades, he plotted revenge. He would kill Ulysses, Agamemnon, and Menelaus. But Athena intervened, clouding his mind with madness. In his delusion, Ajax mistook the army's livestock for his enemies. He slaughtered sheep and cattle, believing he was avenging his honor. The camp was filled with the sounds of his rage, but only innocent animals fell to his sword. He dragged a ram, thinking it was Ulysses, back to his tent for further torment. The gods had turned his fury into farce, his vengeance into tragedy. By dawn, the spell faded. Ajax awoke to a scene of carnage, his hands stained with the blood of beasts, not men. The laughter and whispers of the camp began. His shame was complete. The mighty Ajax had become a figure of pity and ridicule. As the sun rose, Ajax faced the horror of his actions. The blood of livestock covered the ground. The shame was unbearable. Once a hero, now a madman, he could not bear the scorn of his comrades. The humiliation of losing the armor was nothing compared to this disgrace. Ajax, broken and dishonored, saw only one escape death. He resolved to end his life, not in rage, but in cold, quiet despair. His code of honor demanded it. He would not live as a cautionary tale. He prepared for his final act, determined to reclaim dignity in death. The camp outside whispered and laughed, but inside, Ajax's world was silent and still. He would die as a warrior, on his own terms. The decision was final. The tragedy of Ajax was nearly complete. Before his end, Ajax called for his wife Tecmessa and his son Eurysakes. Tecmessa pleaded with him, begging him to stay for their family's sake. She reminded him of their love and the future they had envisioned together. Ajax, torn but resolute, explained that his shame was too great to bear. The weight of his dishonor was a burden he could no longer carry. He gave his son his famous shield, urging him to be luckier but just as brave. He hoped Eurysakes would grow to be a man of honor and courage. He entrusted Eurysakes to his half-brother Teucer, ensuring the boy's protection. Teucer promised to raise Eurysakes as his own, to teach him the ways of a warrior. With his farewells said, Ajax took Hector's sword, the weapon of his greatest enemy. This sword, a symbol of his past victories, would now be the instrument of his end. Alone on the shore, he fixed the blade in the earth. The waves crashed around him, a stark contrast to the stillness of his resolve. He offered a final prayer, cursing his enemies and the gods who had abandoned him. His voice echoed against the cliffs, filled with anguish and defiance. With one decisive act, he fell upon the sword. The pain was swift, a release from the torment that had plagued him. The mighty Ajax chose death over dishonor. His body lay still, a tragic figure against the backdrop of the sea. His story, once of strength, ended in sorrow. Those who loved him mourned deeply, their grief a testament to his impact. The camp would soon learn of his fate. The news of his death spread quickly, leaving a void in the hearts of his comrades. The legacy of Ajax passed to his son. Eurysakes, holding his father's shield, stood ready to honor his name and continue his lineage. News of Ajax's death swept through the camp. Teucer, returning from battle, found his brother's body and was overcome with grief. Agamemnon and Menelaus arrived, cold and unyielding. Menelaus declared Ajax a traitor, ordering his body left unburied, a fate worse than death. Teucer, furious, stood over Ajax, vowing to bury him regardless of the king's commands. He reminded them of Ajax's heroism, accusing the leaders of pettiness and ingratitude. The confrontation grew heated, kings on one side, a grieving brother on the other. The camp was on the brink of violence, the Greek alliance fracturing over the fate of a fallen hero. Honor, loyalty, and pride clashed in the shadow of Ajax's death. The question of burial became a test of the army's very soul. Would they honor a hero, or let bitterness destroy them? The answer hung in the balance. Agamemnon refused to yield, insisting Ajax's actions threatened the army's discipline. Menelaus echoed his brother, arguing that madness was no excuse for attempted murder. They wanted Ajax's memory to serve as a warning, not an inspiration. Teucer, driven by love and loyalty, refused to let his brother's legacy be defined by one night of madness. He argued that a lifetime of heroism outweighed a single tragic mistake. The soldiers were divided, some loyal to the kings, others to Ajax's memory. The camp teetered on the edge of chaos, the dispute threatening to tear the Greeks apart. Honor and authority clashed, and the dead hero's fate became a symbol of the army's struggle. Teucer stood firm, demanding respect for Ajax. The kings would not relent. The standoff deepened, and the crisis grew. The fate of Ajax's body would decide the unity of the Greeks. As tensions peaked, Ulysses arrived, the man whose victory had sparked the tragedy. Teucer lashed out, blaming him for Ajax's death. But Ulysses surprised everyone. He did not gloat, but mourned Ajax's fall. He urged Agamemnon and Menelaus to grant Ajax a proper burial, arguing that honoring the dead was a mark of true greatness. Ulysses reminded them that today's enemy could be tomorrow's fallen friend. He spoke of shared humanity, urging compassion over vengeance. His words, sincere and wise, moved even Agamemnon. Reluctantly, the king agreed to the burial, though he refused to participate. Thanks to Ulysses's plea, Ajax was granted the honor he deserved. The camp's unity was preserved, if only barely. Ulysses's empathy turned rivalry into respect. The Greeks prepared to lay Ajax to rest. The cycle of pride and forgiveness continued. Teucer prepared Ajax's body for a hero's funeral. The Greeks watched in silence, mourning a champion lost to pride and madness. Ajax's story became a cautionary tale, strength undone by wounded honor. The gods had turned his greatest gift into his downfall. Yet in the end, it was Ulysses who showed true nobility, urging forgiveness and respect for the fallen. The lesson was clear. Honor is not just in victory, but in compassion for even our rivals. Ajax's sword was buried with him, but his story endured. His legacy was both a warning and an inspiration. The shadow of Ajax loomed over Troy, a reminder that the hardest battles are fought within. His tale, tragic and profound, would never be forgotten.